What happens when a Hollywood royal thinks she can waltz onto British television and rewrite the rules? In just 31 seconds, one cutting comment about working mothers would turn Meghan Markle from gracious guest to public enemy number one, as Judi Love delivered the most savage takedown in loose women history. This is the story of how entitlement met its match, and why you should never underestimate a woman who's fought for everything she's earned. The Loose Women studio buzzed with unusual energy that Tuesday afternoon. Cameras rolled as the familiar theme music faded, revealing the iconic panel desk where four of Britain's most outspoken women sat ready for what they thought would be another routine celebrity interview. Judi Love, the comedian-turned-presenter who'd clawed her way from single mother to television star, anchored the discussion with her trademark warmth. Beside her sat Ruth Langsford, the veteran broadcaster whose decades of experience had taught her to spot trouble from a mile away. Colleen Nolan rounded out the panel, her Irish wit and no-nonsense attitude making her a fan favorite, while Kay Adams brought her Scottish sensibility to balance the group. "Right then, ladies," Judi announced, her smile genuine as she addressed the camera. "We've got a very special guest joining us today. She's been making headlines around the world, and now she's here to share her thoughts on motherhood, career, and finding balance in the public eye." The audience applauded politely as Meghan Markle walked onto the set, her designer outfit pristine and her media-trained smile firmly in place. She settled into the guest chair with practiced ease, crossing her legs elegantly and folding her hands in her lap. "Meghan, lovely to have you here," Judi began, her tone professional but friendly. "You've been quite vocal recently about the challenges of being a working mother. Can you tell our viewers about that experience?" Meghan's eyes lit up, clearly ready to launch into what sounded like a prepared speech. "Well, Judi, I think what people don't understand is the unique pressures that come with my position. When you're trying to balance royal duties, media appearances, charitable work, and raising children, it becomes incredibly overwhelming. Most mothers simply don't have to deal with the level of scrutiny and responsibility that I face daily." Ruth shifted slightly in her seat, her eyebrows raising just a fraction. Colleen exchanged a quick glance with Kay, both women sensing something in Meghan's tone that didn't sit quite right. "I mean," Meghan continued, warming to her theme, "when I wake up in the morning, I'm not just thinking about getting the children ready for school. I'm considering which charitable causes need my attention, which media appearances will best serve my brand, and how every single thing I do will be analyzed by millions of people. It's a level of complexity that most working mothers could never comprehend." The studio fell quiet for a moment. Judi's smile remained fixed, but something had changed in her eyes. The warmth was still there, but it was joined by something sharper, more calculating. "Most working mothers?" Judi repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. "That's interesting, Meghan. Because sitting at this very table, we have women who've juggled television careers, raised children, dealt with public scrutiny, and somehow managed to do it without suggesting that other mothers couldn't comprehend their struggles." Meghan's smile flickered, but she pressed on. "Oh, I'm not diminishing anyone else's experience. I'm simply pointing out that my situation is rather unique. When Ruth goes home after filming, she can switch off. When I go home, I'm still representing an institution, still being photographed, still being expected to be perfect at all times." Ruth Langsford leaned forward, her voice steady but with an edge. "Actually, Meghan, I don't get to switch off. When I leave this studio, I go home to care for my husband who has dementia. I've been doing live television for 30 years while raising a son, dealing with family crises, and, yes, being in the public eye. The difference is, I've never assumed that made me more special than any other working mother." The tension in the studio was palpable now. Meghan's composure slipped slightly, her smile becoming more forced. "I think there might be some misunderstanding here. I wasn't trying to suggest that I'm more special than anyone. I was simply trying to illustrate the unique challenges that come with my particular role." Colleen Nolan couldn't help but interject, her Irish accent thickening as her irritation grew. "Unique challenges? Love, I've raised 4 children while working in television, dealt with very public divorces, battled addiction issues in the spotlight, and somehow managed to do it all without acting like other mothers couldn't possibly understand my life. What exactly makes your challenges so much more difficult than ours?" Meghan's face flushed slightly. "Well, I think the scale is rather different. The global attention, the royal protocols, the constant media pressure. It's not really comparable to regular television work." That's when Judi Love's professional mask finally slipped. Her smile disappeared completely, replaced by an expression of barely controlled disbelief. "Regular television work? Meghan, let me tell you something about regular television work. I started as a single mother with 2 kids, working multiple jobs just to pay the rent. I didn't have staff to help me. I didn't have designers dressing me. I didn't have a team of publicists managing my image. I worked my backside off to get where I am today. And I did it while being scrutinized by the press, criticized by viewers, and judged by people who thought a working-class woman like me didn't belong on their screens. The studio was dead silent now, the audience hanging on every word. Meghan opened her mouth to respond, but Judi wasn't finished. And you know what? Every single woman on this panel has a similar story. Ruth has been in broadcasting longer than you've been alive, dealing with everything from family tragedies to professional setbacks, all while maintaining her dignity, and never once suggesting that other women couldn't understand her struggles. Colleen has faced more public humiliation and personal pain than most people could handle, yet she's never claimed her problems were more complex than anyone else's. Meghan's composure was cracking now, her voice taking on a defensive edge. I'm not trying to diminish anyone's experiences. I'm simply trying to explain that when you're part of the royal family, when every move you make affects an entire institution, the pressure is enormous. I don't think that's unreasonable to point out. Kay Adams, who had been quietly observing the exchange, finally spoke up. Meghan, the issue isn't whether your life has pressures. Of course it does. The issue is the way you're presenting those pressures as somehow beyond the comprehension of other working mothers. Do you realize how that sounds to women who are watching this? Women who are struggling to balance jobs and children and mortgages and aging parents? All without the resources and support systems that you have access to? Meghan's face hardened, her media-trained facade finally cracking completely. I think you're all being rather unfair. I came here expecting a supportive conversation about the challenges of motherhood, not to be attacked by a panel of women who clearly have some sort of agenda against me. Judi Love's eyebrows shot up, her voice rising with incredulous anger. Agenda? The only agenda we have is calling out nonsense when we hear it. You came onto our show, in front of our audience, and basically told millions of working mothers that they couldn't possibly understand your struggles because their lives aren't complex enough. How did you think that was going to go down? That's not what I said, Meghan protested, but her voice lacked conviction now. I was simply trying to provide context for my unique situation. Your unique situation, Ruth repeated, shaking her head. Meghan, you married into wealth and privilege. Yes, that comes with pressures, but let's not pretend you're struggling to put food on the table or choosing between heating your home and buying school uniforms for your children. Those are the realities that most of our viewers face. Colleen leaned forward, her voice sharp with frustration. And another thing, Love, you keep talking about representing an institution and being perfect all the time. But here's the thing about institutions. They're built by ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Every woman on this panel represents something. I represent every mother who's made mistakes and learned from them. Ruth represents every woman who's built a career through decades of hard work. Judi represents every single mother who refused to let circumstances define her future. Meghan's composure was completely gone now, replaced by barely contained irritation. Well, perhaps if you understood the weight of royal responsibility, you might have more empathy for my situation. When I make a mistake, it reflects on centuries of tradition. When I speak, my words are analyzed by constitutional experts. That level of scrutiny is something most people, including yourselves, have never experienced. The studio erupted in a chorus of incredulous gasps from the audience. Judi Love stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the floor as she rose to her full height. Her voice, when she spoke, was dangerously quiet. Most people, including ourselves, have never experienced that level of scrutiny. Meghan, do you have any idea what it's like to be a black woman in British television? Do you know what it feels like to have every word you say picked apart, not just by media critics, but by people who think you don't deserve to be there in the first place? Ruth placed a restraining hand on Judi's arm, but her own voice was ice cold. And as for constitutional experts analyzing your words, Meghan, I've been presenting news and current affairs for 3 decades. Every word I say is scrutinized by viewers, by Ofcom, by politicians, by journalists. The difference is, I don't act like I'm the only person in the world facing that pressure. Meghan was clearly flustered now, her carefully constructed public persona completely abandoned. I think you're all being deliberately obtuse. The royal family operates on a different level entirely. My children will one day be part of the line of succession. The decisions I make affect not just my family, but an entire commonwealth. That's not the same as presenting a television show or doing stand-up comedy. Kay Adams laughed, but there was no humor in it. Your children are seventh and eighth in line to the throne, Meghan. Let's not pretend they're next in line to rule the country. And even if they were, that doesn't make your daily struggles as a mother any more complex or difficult than those of women who are raising future doctors, teachers, firefighters, or even future television presenters. Colleen couldn't contain herself any longer. And another thing, you keep going on about this weight of responsibility. But where was all this concern about royal tradition when you were doing tell-all interviews and writing books about the family? You can't have it both ways, love. You can't claim the institution is so important that it makes your life impossibly difficult, while simultaneously spending years publicly criticizing that same institution. Meghan's face flushed red with anger. How dare you question my commitment to royal duties? I gave up my entire career, my independence, my life in America to serve the crown. I sacrificed everything, and all I got in return was criticism and judgment from people who have no understanding of what that sacrifice entailed. Judi Love's laugh was sharp and bitter. Sacrificed everything? Meghan, you married into one of the wealthiest families in the world. You gained international fame, designer wardrobes, beautiful homes, and financial security that most people can only dream of. If that's sacrifice, then sign me up right now. You don't understand, Meghan snapped, her voice rising with frustration. Money and fame don't protect you from the emotional toll of constant criticism. They don't make it easier when you're trying to raise children who will grow up in the spotlight. They don't help when you're dealing with family members who seem determined to undermine everything you try to achieve. Ruth's voice was steady but firm. No one said money and fame make everything easy, Meghan, but they do make many things easier. And what we're trying to tell you is that every mother faces emotional tolls. Every mother worries about how their children will handle the world around them. Every mother deals with family tensions and criticism. The difference is, most mothers don't have teams of staff to help them cope. I don't have teams of staff helping me with my children, Meghan protested. I'm very hands-on with my parenting. Colleen rolled her eyes. Right, but you do have housekeepers, and gardeners, and security teams, and nannies when you need them, and stylists, and publicists, and personal assistants. When I was raising my kids, if I needed help, I had to call my mom and hope she wasn't working that day. Meghan's voice took on a petulant tone. I think you're all being incredibly unfair and hostile. I came here to have an honest conversation about the challenges of motherhood, and instead I'm being attacked for daring to suggest that my situation might be different from yours. Judi Love sat back down, but her posture remained rigid with controlled anger. Meghan, you didn't suggest your situation was different. You suggested it was so much more complex and difficult that other mothers couldn't comprehend it. There's a massive difference between those two things. And frankly, Kay added, the fact that you can't see that difference is exactly the problem. It shows a complete lack of awareness about how privileged your position really is, and how insulting it is to suggest that working mothers who are struggling with real financial pressures somehow have simpler lives than you do. Meghan was clearly losing control now, her voice shaking with indignation. Privilege? You think being torn apart by the British press every single day is privilege? You think having your every move criticized and analyzed is some sort of gift? You think raising children while knowing that everything you do will be scrutinized and judged by millions of people is easy? No one said it was easy, Ruth replied calmly. But yes, Meghan, being able to raise your children in beautiful homes with every possible advantage, knowing they'll never want for anything, knowing they'll have the best education money can buy, knowing they'll never have to worry about whether there's enough money for food or clothes or school trips, that is privilege. A difficult kind of privilege, perhaps, but privilege nonetheless. Meghan's voice cracked with barely controlled fury. You know what? I don't have to sit here and listen to this. I came here in good faith to share my experiences, and instead I'm being ganged up on by 4 women who clearly have issues with successful people. The silence that followed was deafening. Judi Love's face went through a series of expressions, from shock to disbelief to something approaching rage. When she finally spoke, her voice was so quiet the entire studio had to strain to hear her. Issues with successful people? Judi repeated, each word dropping like a stone into still water. Meghan, every single woman sitting at this table is successful. We've all built careers, raised families, overcome obstacles, and earned our places here through hard work and talent. The difference between us and you is that we've never forgotten where we came from. Ruth Langsford nodded slowly, her professional composure intact but her eyes blazing. And we've certainly never suggested that our success somehow makes us incapable of understanding other people's struggles. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Success should make you more empathetic, not less. Meghan stood up abruptly, clearly preparing to leave. I think this interview is over. I'm not going to sit here and be lectured by people who clearly don't understand the complexities of my position. Sit down, Judi said firmly, her voice cutting through the studio like a blade. You don't get to come onto our show, insult our viewers, dismiss our experiences, and then flounce off when you don't like being challenged. For a moment, it looked like Meghan might actually leave. She hesitated, clearly torn between her desire to escape and her media-trained instinct to maintain some semblance of composure. Finally, she sat back down, but her posture was rigid with resentment. I haven't insulted anyone, she said through gritted teeth. I've simply been honest about my experiences. Colleen Nolan let out a harsh laugh. Honest? Love, you've spent the last 20 minutes telling us that working mothers can't comprehend your struggles, that your life is more complex than ours, that we don't understand scrutiny or pressure, and that we have issues with successful people. If that's your idea of honesty, then I'd hate to see you being dishonest. I never said my life was more complex than yours, Meghan protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Kay Adams leaned forward, her Scottish accent sharp with irritation. Meghan, we can all hear. The cameras are rolling. You literally said that most mothers simply don't have to deal with the level of scrutiny and responsibility that you face daily. You said it's a level of complexity that most working mothers could never comprehend. Those were your exact words. Meghan's face crumpled slightly, the realization that she was being recorded apparently hitting home. I was taken out of context. I was trying to explain the unique aspects of royal life. No, Judi said firmly, standing up again and pointing directly at Meghan. You weren't taken out of context. You were speaking from a place of such profound privilege and entitlement that you genuinely believe your problems are bigger and more important than everyone else's. And that, Meghan, is exactly why this conversation has gone the way it has. Ruth's voice was measured but unforgiving. You see, Meghan, the thing about being in the public eye is that it teaches you humility. When you know that millions of people are watching, listening, judging every word you say, it makes you more careful, more thoughtful, more aware of how your words might affect others. It doesn't make you more self-important. I am not self-important, Meghan snapped. But even she seemed to realize how hollow the words sounded. Colleen shook her head sadly. Love, you've just spent half an hour explaining to 4 working mothers why our lives are simpler and less challenging than yours. You've dismissed our experiences, questioned our understanding of pressure and scrutiny, and suggested that we're jealous of successful people. If that's not self-importance, then I don't know what, Island. Meghan's voice rose to a near shout. You're twisting everything I've said. I came here to talk about the challenges of motherhood, not to be psychoanalyzed by a panel of women who clearly have their own agendas. There's that word again, Judi said, her voice dripping with contempt. Agenda, Meghan. Our only agenda is honesty. Our agenda is representing the millions of women who watch this show, women who work multiple jobs to support their families, women who worry about paying bills and caring for elderly parents and helping their children with homework after working all day. Our agenda is not letting someone sit in that chair and tell those women that their lives are too simple for them to understand real complexity. The studio audience, who had been silent throughout most of the exchange, began to murmur and shift in their seats. The tension was so thick it was almost suffocating. I think, Meghan said, her voice shaking with barely controlled emotion, that this has gone far enough. I don't appreciate being attacked like this. Attacked? Ruth's eyebrows shot up. Meghan, you're not being attacked. You're being held accountable for your words. There's a significant difference. Kay nodded in agreement. And frankly, if you think this is an attack, then you really haven't experienced the kind of scrutiny you claim to be so familiar with. This is just 4 women having an honest conversation about the things you've said. An honest conversation? Meghan's laugh was bitter and sharp. This feels more like an ambush. I thought Loose Women was supposed to be a supportive environment for women to share their experiences. Judi Love had clearly reached her breaking point. Her voice, when she spoke, was filled with a cold fury that silenced the entire studio. Meghan Markle, let me tell you something about support. Support is what we give to women who are struggling. Support is what we offer to mothers who are trying to balance impossible schedules with limited resources. Support is what we provide to women who face real discrimination and real hardship. But support is not what we give to people who come onto our show and use their platform to look down on other women's experiences. She paused, letting the words sink in before continuing. You want to know what Loose Women really is? It's a place where ordinary women can see themselves reflected, where they can feel understood and valued. It's not a place for people to come and explain why their lives are so much more difficult and complex than everyone else's. And that, Meghan, is exactly what you've been doing from the moment you sat down in that chair. The silence that followed was absolute. Meghan sat frozen, clearly realizing that she had badly misjudged the situation and the women she was dealing with. "I think," Judi continued, her voice steady and final, "that this interview is over. Meghan, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This isn't working, and frankly, I don't think continuing this conversation would be beneficial for anyone involved." Meghan's mouth fell open in shock. "You're asking me to leave?" "I'm not asking," Judi replied calmly. "I'm telling you. This is our show, our studio, and our audience. And we're not going to allow anyone, regardless of their title or status, to use our platform to diminish and dismiss the experiences of working mothers." For a moment that stretched on forever, Meghan sat perfectly still, as if she couldn't quite believe what was happening. Then, slowly, she stood up, her face a mixture of humiliation and rage. "This is absolutely disgraceful," she said, her voice shaking. "I've never been treated with such disrespect." Judi Love looked directly into the camera, addressing the viewers at home rather than Meghan. "Ladies, that's all we have time for today on Loose Women. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow." The credits began to roll as Meghan Markle walked off the set, her heels clicking sharply against the studio floor, leaving behind a panel of women who had just delivered the most devastating takedown in British television history.